Look, on to another issue. And once again, it's a private member's bill, largely done as a political signal coming from New Zealand First. And Winston's been playing this up hugely. The anti-woke banking bill. Shane Jones is into it. Some banks are now, and the BNZ being a particular example, and I didn't realise this before today, banks have to audit their major corporate customers on climate change, which is just incredibly weird. But they are now trying in the rural sector, and there's a parliamentary inquiry into this, and in the energy sector or the fossil fuel sector. Some banks are saying we will not lend to you and we're going to basically wind back your loans because we just don't want to do business with you anymore. We tried to get the Bankers Association on this, and they really are a bunch of, oh gosh, there are so many words I could use. They're not really there to communicate the views of the banks. They're there to lobby government for banks. And I just think their response in not talking to... What was the feedback you got from Philip Van Dyke?
Oh, they just always have some rubbish reason why they
we can't speak for individual banks.
There's nothing really more to add or whatever. Well, then why are you an organisation?
Yeah, then why do you
even
exist? Well, you exist to try and... You exist to take politicians to lunch and glad hand politicians in the interest of your banking clients. That's right. So, look, we can't get the banking industry or the banks to engage on this because clearly they're... Well, my presumption is always when that happens that they don't have a defensible position. But we do have someone in New Zealand who we talked to before on the program who is, well, I guess an academic expert in banking and the vagaries of that sector, Professor Claire Matthews, and she joins us by phone now. Claire, thank you very much indeed for joining us once more.
Morena, Sean.
All right. Firstly, let's just look at the bill, which basically does it not suggest sanctions, financial sanctions, against banks who discriminate in terms of who they will give loans to or do business with, right?
That's my understanding of the legislation, yes.
Okay. Does anywhere else in the world have legislation like that? Is it like a thing?
To be honest, I'm not aware of any. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but it's not something that I've come across previously.
Yeah, all right. Do banks have, and is it normal practice elsewhere in the world, for banks to discriminate on the grounds of the activities of their customers as to what level of service they'll give them or whether or not they will give them service at all?
Certainly banks can choose who they will bank with and who they won't bank with. Now, they need to think about the reasons why they will be choosing not to bank a particular customer, and they can't do it on any of the grounds prohibited under legislation, such as the Human Rights Act.
Which is like gender, political views, ethnic background. You can't discriminate. Can they do it on age?
No, because that's banned under that legislation as well.
Okay, but they can do it if you're a farmer or you're a miner.
Well, but they can do it on commercial grounds. I mean, fundamentally, banks are in the business of risk management, and what they are looking at with any of their clients that they're dealing with is what is the risk to us of dealing with you. Mostly the banks are doing a reasonable amount of business with farmers, but the reality is that the farming sector has a number of risks, not least of which are those related to the climate change and the whole, the economic...
Because we're signed up to the Paris Accord, even though it's evaporating around the world.
Yeah, so there's part of that. But farms are risky simply because they're dependent on the weather. And so with climate change...
But they've always been risky, Claire.
But they've always been risky. And I'm not aware that the banks have made any substantial changes in terms of how they deal with the farmers.
Yeah.
That they continue. They have always, for a long time, farmers have complained about the way they deal with banks or banks deal with them. So that seems to be an ongoing, long-term issue, if you like. So yes, banks have always recognised that there's a risk. They've taken on that risk and they price for it.
But now the rules have been changed. I think the ultimate sanction, actually, Claire, should be deregistration as a bank, losing status as a bank if you're going to behave unreasonably. What impact would that have on a financial institution like the BNZ if it wasn't given a licence to be a bank anymore?
Well, it would simply close down.
Wow.
If it's not operating, if it's not licensed as a bank in New Zealand, it can't operate. So it's not going to be here. So if you were to take away its license to operate because it was deemed to be breaching this legislation, it's just going to disappear. So then what are you going to do with all their customers, personal customers, business customers? You've got to find a new home for them. That can't happen overnight, and if it can happen at all.
Whether or not this legislation gets passed, whatever the, if you like, the political motivation behind it, does it feel workable to you?
No, I don't think it is. Fundamentally, banks have to make commercial decisions. And actually, that's why they're not keen on lending to or dealing with mining companies, because there is a substantial risk to them of getting landed with a company that actually can no longer operate. Because, okay, in the current environment, you've got a government that is very supportive of mining, but in 3, 6, 10 years' time, you may have an environment and a government that is basically saying needs to go out of business.
Yeah.
And the banks are suddenly stuck with these customers that are no longer able to operate in a commercial way and in a profitable way, and therefore able to repay their debts. So banks are simply taking account of the risk associated with that sector.
Okay, so it's not that they're just being woke.
I don't think so, no.
All right. Claire, I understand more about this issue than I did 5 minutes ago. I thank you very much for that.
It's good. All good.
Cheers. Professor Claire Matthews, banking expert. All right, so it's all just business. Okay.